On the afternoon of July 14th, 1905, at exactly 3:20 p.m., in a quiet solicitor's office on Bridge Street in Bath, England, a group of well-dressed individuals sat in uneasy silence as a document was unfolded on a polished wooden desk, its edges crisp, its ink fresh, and its contents about to reveal something none of them were prepared to hear. The man whose will was being read, Arthur Whitcombe, had been buried just 2 days earlier, a respected figure in the community, known for his wealth, his discipline, and his carefully controlled life. Those gathered in the room, his younger brother, his distant cousins, and 2 longtime associates, had come expecting clarity, perhaps even comfort, in the distribution of his estate. Instead, within the first few minutes, they were met with a single line that changed everything. To Miss Eleanor Hartwell, the solicitor read slowly, "I leave the sum of £8,000, along with the property known as Briarwood House." The room fell completely still. No one spoke. No one moved. Because no one in that room, nor in the entire town, as it would soon be discovered, had ever heard that name before. Arthur Whitcombe had lived a life that appeared, from the outside, both structured and predictable. He was 49 years old at the time of his death, a man who had never married, never publicly courted anyone, and rarely spoke about his personal life beyond what was necessary. His days were routine, his habits consistent, and his reputation built on quiet reliability. He managed properties across Somerset, maintained detailed records of his finances, and attended social functions only when obligation demanded it. There was nothing about him that suggested mystery until that moment. "Who is she?" His brother, Thomas Whitcombe, finally asked, his voice tight with confusion. The solicitor adjusted his glasses slightly, glancing down at the document again. "There is no further explanation provided," he replied. "Only the name and the bequest." Thomas frowned. "That's not possible. Arthur would not leave half his estate to someone without reason." One of the cousins leaned forward. "Could it be a mistake?" The solicitor shook his head calmly. "The will was written and signed in March of this year, witnessed properly. There is no indication of error." The name remained in the air long after the reading ended. Eleanor Hartwell, spoken quietly, repeated in low voices, carried out of the office and into the streets of Bath, where curiosity spreads quickly when fed with something unknown. Within days, people began asking questions, not just about the woman, but about Arthur himself. Had he known her? Had he hidden something? Had there been a part of his life that no one had ever seen? Thomas Whitcombe took it upon himself to find answers. He began with the simplest approach, asking those who had worked closely with Arthur. "Did he ever mention anyone by that name?" he asked Mr. Ellison, a clerk who had assisted Arthur for nearly 10 years. The man shook his head immediately. "No, sir. Mr. Whitcombe was not one to speak of personal matters. Everything was business." Thomas pressed further. "No letters? No visits?" "None that I recall," Ellison replied. But absence of evidence did not erase the presence of the name. Weeks passed, and the search expanded beyond Bath into neighboring towns, records offices, and even church registries. The name Eleanor Hartwell began appearing in conversations that had nothing to do with Arthur Whitcombe, as though people were trying to place her somewhere, anywhere, within the known world. But nothing came back. No birth records that matched, no marriage records, no property ownership. It was as if she existed only within that will and nowhere else. Then, on August 2nd, 1905, something changed. A letter arrived at the solicitor's office, addressed simply to the executor of Arthur Whitcombe's estate. The handwriting was neat but unfamiliar, the paper of modest quality. Inside, there was no greeting, no introduction, only a short message. I believe I may have information regarding the name mentioned in the will. I will come in person. It was unsigned. The following afternoon, at precisely 2:10 p.m., a woman entered the office. She was not what anyone expected. She appeared to be in her early 40s, dressed plainly, her posture reserved, her expression composed but guarded. There was nothing outwardly remarkable about her, and yet the moment she stepped inside, the room seemed to shift slightly, as though something long anticipated had finally arrived. "My name is Eleanor Hartwell," she said quietly. The solicitor stood, his attention fully captured now. "You understand why your presence here is significant," he replied. She nodded once. "I do." Thomas Whitcombe was summoned immediately. When he entered the room and saw her, his reaction was not recognition, but something closer to disbelief. "You expect us to believe this?" he asked, his tone edged with skepticism. "That you are the woman named in my brother's will?" Eleanor did not react. "I do not expect you to believe anything," she said calmly. "Only to listen." And so they did. She began slowly, choosing her words with care. "I knew Arthur Whitcombe," she said, "but not in the way you think, not publicly, not recently." Thomas crossed his arms. "Then explain," he said, "because no one here has ever heard your name." Eleanor paused briefly before continuing. "I first met Arthur in the winter of 1878, she said. "I was 16. He was 22. He came to the village where I lived to oversee a property matter. It was meant to be temporary, but he stayed longer than expected." The room remained silent. "We spoke," she continued. "At first, only in passing, then more often. He was not the man you knew. Not then. He was different, less certain, less controlled." Her voice softened slightly. "We became close." Thomas shifted slightly. "And then?" he asked. "And then," Eleanor said, "he left." The simplicity of the statement carried more weight than its length. "He was called back to Bath," she explained. "Responsibilities, expectations, things he could not ignore." She looked down briefly. He did not say goodbye. "And you?" the solicitor asked quietly. "I remained," she said. "Life continued, as it does." Thomas's voice cut in again. "That does not explain why he left you his estate," he said. "A brief acquaintance does not justify this." Eleanor looked at him directly now. "It was not brief," she said. There was a pause. Then she spoke again. "I had his child." The words landed with a quiet finality that filled the room. Thomas stared at her. "That is a serious claim," he said slowly. "I know," she replied. "And where is this child?" he asked. Eleanor's expression changed, not dramatically, but enough to be seen. "He died," she said, "at the age of 5. No one spoke. "For years," she continued, "I heard nothing from Arthur. I assumed he had chosen his life, as I had chosen mine. But in 1890 I received a letter. It contained no explanation, only acknowledgement and money. Enough to survive." She paused. "After that, nothing again, until now." Thomas shook his head slightly, as though trying to reconcile something that refused to align. "Why would he wait until his death to do this?" he asked. Eleanor's answer came without hesitation. "Because he could not do it while he was alive." Silence settled over the room once more. Not the kind of silence that comes from confusion, but the kind that follows understanding. Arthur Whitcombe had lived a life of order, of expectation, of control. But somewhere in that life, there, had been something else, something he had never spoken of, something he had never corrected, until the end. Eleanor Hartwell accepted what was left to her, not with celebration, but with a quiet acknowledgement that felt less like reward and more like closure. She did not remain in Bath for long. Within months, she sold Briarwood House and returned to the countryside, where she had lived before, where no one knew her name, and where no one asked questions she had already answered. Thomas Whitcombe never spoke of her again, but those who had been present that day remembered, not the money, not the property, but the truth that had existed quietly for nearly 30 years without being seen. And now I want to ask you something. Do you think Arthur Whitcombe's final act was one of guilt or one of love that came too late to be spoken out loud? Tell me your thoughts in the comments, and if stories like this remind you that the past is never truly gone, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay for the next story.